Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 61, where we are talking about two games about flowers and cities that can fit in your pocket, Tussie Mussie and Sprawlopolis. That's right, we are doing our first ever doubleheader episode because both of these games are completely tiny.
Yeah, they're T90.
T90 little games. So, yeah, we'll get into the reviews for both of those in just a minute, but we're going to start like we always do with the news. And the news comes to us this time from tablefor1.me, which is a great site for finding solo game news and reviews. So we get our stories from there, and you should check them out when you get a chance. Our first news story for this week is that CGE Games has announced that they are publishing Under Falling Skies. Have you heard anything about this game?
Nothing.
Okay, Under Falling Skies kind of recently got a big boost because it's a solo print and play game about playing as a besieged city with spaceships that have come in and are attacking the city. It's got kind of a Space Invaders vibe to it.
Okay, so a little wacky.
It's a little wacky. Like you stack several cards vertically that form the picture of the city down below, and the sky up above has kind of a cool panorama type thing. It's a print and play title that Shut Up and Sit Down covered in a solo special episode they did during quarantine.
Oh, okay.
Well, now it's been picked up by CGE, and Kwanchai Moria is doing the artwork, the guy who did Dinosaur Island.
Oh, yeah.
Like really bright, vivid, crazy colors, and it looks fantastic. They've taken this little, I think it was like a 9-card game or something. It's really small, and they've expanded it out so that now it has like a solo campaign with different missions and that sort of thing. So it's a pretty cool thing. They really expanded it greatly. So I'm really kind of anxious to check that out. If you are at all interested in that, that is Under Falling Skies, and that is coming from CGE Games in Q4 of 2020. Our second story for this week is Hans im Glück Games has announced that they are releasing a print and play version of the solo mode for Russian Railroads. Russian Railroads is a game that isn't talked about as often anymore, but when it came out, it was kind of the big game of, I think, Essen that year. If I'm remembering correctly, I think it might have originally come out from Z-Man Games in the US. It was kind of an engine building game about building trains and that sort of thing, but it didn't have a solo mode in the box. It didn't get a solo mode until the German Railroads expansion came out 2 years later. And expansions like that are kind of bigger, more expensive expansions that also happen to include a solo mode, a lot of people aren't going to have a chance to check it out. Because unless you really like the game and you want more than just the solo mode, you're not going to pick it up.
Right.
So I thought it was really cool that they're kind of jumping on board that trend of releasing a free solo mode, but it's one they've already got that just maybe more people haven't gotten access to yet. So if you haven't checked this out and you like Russian Railroads, you definitely should give this a look. I've heard nothing but great things about this game, so give that a chance if you're looking for something to play. That is Russian Railroads from Hans im Glück. And our last bit of news this week is Stronghold Games has launched a Kickstarter for the Terraforming Mars Big Box. Have you seen this?
No.
Oh, man. What I love about this is that we've needed a better storage solution for Terraforming Mars for some time. I mean, I personally don't because I only have the Prelude expansion, and that's really all I need. But if you like the other expansions, they take up quite a bit of room. I'm not sure how you could fit them into the base game box at this point. Alongside that storage solution that they've come up with, which is a gigantic, deep box, they've also decided to release 3D miniatures in place of all the tiles.
What?
Which look crazy awesome. But here's the thing, Carter. Were the tiles what was wrong with the look of this game?
No, that's not the problem. That's not the aesthetic challenge that this game has.
Oh, man, it just kills me. I think these look cool, and I think the big box looks chunky and awesome, right? But personally, I don't have any interest in Venus Next or Colonies or Turmoil, and I love Terraforming Mars. And so do you.
Yeah. Really, for me, it would just be like Prelude and the base game, and that's so much right there, and that's really all I want.
Yeah, that's what I've got right now. Well, the only other thing I might get is that extra board.
Right. I say that's all I want. what I want is cards that don't make my eyes bleed.
Right. If they release an edition of this game, and by that I mean if somebody else takes this game away from Stronghold and gives it the production that it deserves, because I personally think that Stronghold is one of the weakest publishers in the area of production, I would buy that in a heartbeat, man. If they redid the artwork and everything for this, because I love this game and it deserves to get that treatment, but it's just not there. But if you do have all the expansions and love them, and a lot of people do, and you have been looking for a storage solution, I mean, God bless you. I don't know how you've made it this long without one. This is it.
That's a big old box.
It's a big old box. It is a $99 box. But that's $99 with the organizers and dividers and miniatures.
Right.
I mean, it's not cheap, but it's also... it's what you'll want. It's the be-all, end-all thing. Right. And it looks like the MSRP for this is going to be $50 higher. So if you don't want to pay $150 at retail for it, this is probably the time to jump in on it. So if you're at all interested in Terraforming Mars and you have all the expansions, check out the Terraforming Mars Big Box expansion from Stronghold on Kickstarter right now. All right, that's all we've got for the news this time around. Before we get into our first review, we want to say that this episode is sponsored, as always, by Stone Valley Games. Stone Valley Games is an outstanding online board game and card game retailer. I guess, and I should say tabletop role-playing game retailer as well. Really great, friendly, helpful staff, a great selection of games. They're geared towards solo games in particular, so they do a good job featuring new solo games on their page. They keep good stuff in stock. They really do excellent work. In fact, I got a package from Stone Valley Games just this week. As soon as we got back from seeing my family, I had a little package from them with the new Black Widow expansion for Marvel Champions.
Of course you did.
Oh, it's going to be so good. And you know what? It was wrapped up in a big, thick kind of bubble wrap packaging, and it was stuffed inside of a padded envelope, and it had a handwritten note from Eric inside.
Oh.
Yeah, man, they're just the real deal. So if you have not shopped from them yet, you need to give them a shot. StoneValleyGames.com. Great supporters of this show and a great place to buy games. All right, we're going to get into the review now. We're going to start with Tussie Mussie. Tussie Mussie comes to us from designers Elizabeth Hargrave, who designed the main game, and Mike Mullins, who designed the Flower Shop expansion, which allows you to play the game solo. This game is produced by Button Shy Games. It plays 1 to 4 players. I guess I should say it plays 2 to 4 players, or 1 to 4 if you have that Flower Shop expansion. In Tussie Mussie, you engage in the Victorian fad of exchanging flowers with messages that were conveyed to friends or lovers in the choice of the flowers that you include in a bouquet. So you do this by utilizing a kind of I split you choose drafting mechanic, in which you're choosing flowers that you want to collect. You're using those to build combos to get points that will win you the game. At the end of the third round, whoever has the most points is the winner. So let's start here by talking about the components for this game. The first thing that you're going to notice if you pick this up, if you pick up any game from Button Shy, I think, is that it comes in this little wallet. Basically, all their games, to my knowledge, come in these tiny little wallets that have like 18 cards, I think is kind of their go-to amount.
Right.
And I was unsure of how I'd feel about these little wallets, honestly, but partly because micro games are not always immediately attractive to me. I like destination games when I sit down to play a board game. So when I see something that small, I just don't usually think, ooh, I can't wait to try that. But holding it in my hand, I gotta say, it's amazing how slim and compact these little things are.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, whenever if I'm going to play a game, I want it to be kind of that experience. I want all the tactileness of it. Like, that's what I like if I'm going to play a board game. But yeah, there is something really nice about how compact, like efficient it is with just like space and simplicity of design. It's a little booklet with some cards in it.
It's really nice. I'm surprised by how nice it is. It feels like a very high quality product. I think each of these games tends to be around $15, which if you just look at it, you think, well, that doesn't seem like much for $15, right? Because it's just a tiny little package. But everything about this game is very well produced. The quality of the wallets themselves are really nice. They hold the cards inside great. They don't bend the cards, and I'm really kind of compulsive about that sort of thing. The artwork on Tussie Mussie's cards is phenomenal.
It's so good.
This is actually the same duo that we had with Wingspan, which is really crazy. Elizabeth Hargrave, the designer of Wingspan, designed this game, And Beth Sobel, who did the artwork for that one, did the same for this. And it's very obvious.
Yeah.
I think Beth Sobel's artwork is amazing.
There's like certain games that whenever I'm playing them and my wife walks by, she will stop and comment on them if they look just really pretty or just like gorgeous games like this. And this is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Like her comment when she saw it was like, oh, it looks like a game that I would like.
I think my wife, who doesn't like games, I suspect if I could convince her to sit down and play it, I think she would enjoy it because she works at a cut flower farm when she's not teaching. She's a school teacher normally. I guess that's one of the things I appreciate about this, apart from the artwork even, is Elizabeth Hargrave now is 2 for 2 on giving us really good, interesting themes that lend themselves to beautiful artwork and that just aren't typical themes, right? Like, I didn't know anything about Tussie Mussie, that art of giving flowers.
No.
But it's a real thing.
I mean, I knew that happened. I didn't know they had a name for it.
I didn't either. And the cards here have pictures of flowers on them. They're really beautiful. I really like it. The graphic design is clear. And also just like color palette choices, even like all the colors are kind of soft and inviting in a way that none of my other games on my shelf look like this.
Right.
Like, and I've said this on this show before. I'll admit fully that this is weird, but I have a thing for card backs.
I had no clue what you were about to say.
I just have a thing for card backs. I love seeing what companies put on the backs of their cards because cards are my favorite component, and I love seeing a stack of them and like wanting to flip them over and see what's on the other side, and that back of the card invites you in. I know that's weird. Whatever. I like it. I love the card backs on these. I just do. The whole package is gorgeous. That's what I'm trying to say.
It's well done.
And the rules for the game are what you would expect. They fit inside the wallet.
Right. They're small, simple. I mean, it's 2 little booklets with the solo rules specifically, in addition to the base game. But that takes you, what? I don't know, 3 minutes to read them both?
Yeah, it's nothing. It's super short, really breezy set of rules. Now, for this one, it's important to know that because you need the expansion to play solo, you do have a second rule book that you have to read for solo play. And it is pretty much as long as the original rule book, right?
Yeah.
Or the original rules. But normally that would bother me, except that like it's the tiniest rule set I've ever read for a game.
Yeah, it's so small.
So that's no problem at all. And the rules are very clear. I thought they're really very well explained. And even on such a small piece of paper, they have visual examples. I mean, it's just a testament to the reputation that I've heard about from this publisher. So really nice little package, great rule set. And the play of the game is, for a game that fits in your wallet, really, really interesting.
Yeah, it was not what I was expecting. I mean, just whenever I saw the game, before it had a chance to like read it, find out what it's about or anything like that, I didn't know what to expect. But yeah, so it's a really cool way of having the 2 cards and choosing one and the alternate one going to, the AI in this case, your opponent. But yeah, it's just a really interesting way of how you try to manage what is happening going into your hand or like tableau versus your opponent's and trying to manage points and make smart choices. Yeah. So do you want to go over the rules a little bit more specifically than that?
I think so. I mean, this is an I split, you choose drafting game. And if you're not familiar with those terms, that's okay. I've only played a handful of these. Basically, I split, you choose means you're getting on your turn a selection of something. You're looking at, like in this case, cards. You're drawing 2 cards at the beginning of your turn. You're looking at both of them and you're choosing to put one face up and one face down on the table. And your opponent is going to get to pick from that selection one of those cards to keep. And on the card, it'll say things like let's say it's a red flower, and it'll say you get 1 point at the end of the round for every other red card, including this one. Or, you get 1 point for every different colored card, or 1 point for every card in your keepsake or your bouquet, which are 2 different areas of your play area that we'll talk about in a second. And what I just think is really fascinating about this is because you're not just drafting by looking at the hand of cards and choosing which card you want to keep and passing it on, which is how a lot of drafting works. You have to look and decide, okay, which of these cards do I want? Now, how do I get my opponent to take the other one? And I really think that would be a clever mechanic, even if they weren't both face up, right? Like, let's just say you had a hand of 3 cards and you had to pick 2 or something and to put down. That would already be an interesting play experience. Like in other games I've seen, you have 3 cards and you put down a set of 2 cards and a set of 1 card, and the opponent gets to choose, do I want those 2 cards or do I want just the 1? That's a great grueling kind of choice, right? For this, I love that by putting one of them face down and they don't get to peek at it, they're wondering, why did you choose to flip this one face up? Did you do that because you knew I would want it? Is there something I would want more underneath there? Or is that something you want and you just don't want me to see what it is? Because once you draft one of these cards, you're playing it on the table in front of you. If you drafted it face up, it stays face up in front of you. If you draft it face down, it stays face down in front of you and only you can peek at it. What this leads to is that like Princess Bride moment with the goblet.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I have not played this game multiplayer yet, but I suspect that this would turn into a really interesting kind of bluffing experience. Not just drafting, although the drafting piece of it on its own is interesting. But if I played this game with you one time, it's going to be one kind of experience. On our 10th play of it, it's going to be something else entirely. I don't know. I think that's interesting, especially in those kinds of games. I mean, you've played games like this, right? Like, bluffing games have a way of the meta that develops around them within your game group evolves over time.
Right. And just who you never trust, who you think is more trustworthy, someone you like want revenge on, people who you know are always greedy, or just it's that like local, just kind of personal dynamic that you have with your specific game group.
Yes, and I could see that very much happening with a couple who are playing this game, for instance. Like, I used to play The Resistance quite a bit when that first came out. That was a big game at the school that I was attending, and I remember playing a game with this group, and we always accused this one guy of being the bad guy for a long time. Because he's just one of those guys who likes to start trouble, and he has a kind of a perpetual smirk on his face. And so as soon as the game would start, we would say, this guy's obviously evil, right? And for a long time, that's what we did until it just kept turning out he was good. And then we kind of shifted away from that for a time until he stabbed us in the back. And then we were all back on board that let's accuse Chris train.
I knew that's who it was. It had to have been. There was no way it was anyone else.
I just love that. I think that's so fun when that kind of metagame develops around a group of friends who play the same thing over and over. I can definitely see that happening with this. So I really think that whole mechanic is incredibly clever, and that's the meat of the game. You're trying to draft cards that are going to combo well together to get you points. I mean, you're only drafting 4 over the course of a round, right?
Right, not many.
Very simple, and you're not going to get more than 2 or 3 points out of most of these cards. So it's not like there's a secret kind of 7-point combo lurking in there somewhere. There's not. But if you're not careful, you can get almost no point. And I've had that happen to me before when I just wasn't paying attention. So I don't know. I think the core of this game is really interesting. The solo expansion for it, though.
Right.
I mean, obviously you can't have that.
Right. And that's the thing with games like this. It's impossible to capture that just mind game aspect, the bluffing aspect, because however it's done is artificial, what's under. It's completely random. If a good card or bad card, is the one that's concealed from you.
It is. And the solo mode for this game is really cleverly done.
Right.
Kudos to Mike Mullins for coming up with a way to turn what is essentially a bluffing game. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that. It's not essentially a bluffing game, but it is a game with a heavy bluffing element. Right. Into a really good, solid solo mode. So basically, if you buy this expansion, you get a set of 6 cards. That's all it is. 6 cards in a little rule book. And it tells you every round you need to flip up, not every round, every turn, you need to flip up one of these cards. And on the card, it will say, here's how you place out the 2 cards for the round. And unlike a normal multiplayer game, sometimes you'll place both of them face up, or one of them face up and one face down. That's nice. I like that little change up, I think. Some things obviously are going to have to change. And then the bottom half of the card says you have a choice. You can either take this card and then flip it face down and have your opponent keep theirs face up, or you both can take them and flip them face down. And the reason that matters is at the end of the game, some of those cards that you drafted will say you get 1 point for every flower in your bouquet, right? Those are only cards that were face up. And others will say you get 1 point for every card in your keepsake. And those are only face down.
Yeah.
It's not that you don't score those face down cards. It's just that they belong to kind of a separate group.
Right. It's interesting. I think it is a clever solution to trying to take one of the core aspects that is essentially social and trying to I guess, modify it to kind of shift where the focus is, how you're trying to plan which card you're choosing. And so you're going about choosing it in a different way, and how you're trying to manage what section of your play area the card is going versus, trying to manage also what section is going into your opponent's play area.
I really thought that was pretty cleverly done. They did have to change the game a fair bit to get there.
Right.
But I thought overall it worked really well. The playtime on it is like 15 minutes, maybe. That's about how long my games were. You're going to play 3 rounds of it.
Yeah, 10 to 15 minutes.
And one thing that I thought was really neat about the solo mode is that there is a win condition. At the end of the 3 rounds, you add up your scores, and that's your score for the game. So I thought that was neat. You can definitely lose.
Yes.
But then in addition to that, there's kind of a tier system as well, where if you can win all 3 rounds and win the game, then that's kind of a special accolade thing. So even if you win, it's not like there's nothing more to strive for, because there aren't ways to tweak the difficulty.
No.
But knowing that goal is out there and is very difficult to achieve, is, I think, a compelling reason to come back and revisit the game. I've come to appreciate extra, I think, when games have a win-loss condition, whether it be beating an automa or just trying to reach a certain number of points or whatever, and also grading you on how well you did. That's satisfying to me.
Yeah, it's always nice to kind of have that in there. I enjoyed the solo mode. I think it is a good compromise. I thought it was you can think about it, but it's never going to be too brain-burny or anything. It stays pretty light. It's a nice, I guess, just kind of easygoing game. But I think for me, it could be a little random with how the cards came out and just how much control you had. Because, it's 3 rounds. The rounds are short. It's just 4 cards, or 4 sets of cards coming out. And yeah, that made it kind of difficult to really feel like you're really just digging in, because you were kind of at the mercy of just a couple of cards being drawn.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think in some ways that's nice, right? Because it makes for a pretty breezy experience, and it doesn't matter too much that it's so random, because the game is so short and the rounds are so short, and each round feels like its own kind of game. But yeah, I had the same experience. I thought it was definitely a little too random for me, and it just made me wish I was playing multiplayer, honestly.
Yeah, it made it clear that this is probably where this game shines.
Yeah, I think this might be one of the best little 2-player games out there, would be my guess. I haven't played it 2-player, but just based on what I have seen of it, I think it would be an awesome 2-player game, a good couples game. We'll shorten the good, bad, and ugly portion of the review since we've got another game to cover here, but that would be probably my only bad thing to say about it, is this, that I wish I was playing the multiplayer mode of the game.
Yeah, I mean, that was the core design in my mind. And the single player version had to change it enough to where, it's a fine and clever game. And I think this is where I kind of want as far as lightness for a lot of these types of games that are small, compact, and you're done in like 10 to 15 minutes. But still, it was, I don't know, it left me a little wanting of a different kind of experience.
I could see that. I think a lot of people will feel that way, honestly. I mean, the good for me, outstanding production.
Yeah.
Really beautiful little package, and a good price point, that you'll get a lot of play out of. I think if you play this multiplayer, you'll get a good amount of play out of it. And even if you play it solo, I don't see replayability becoming a big problem, honestly. I think as long as you understand this is not the kind of game you can play every day forever, right? That's just not going to work that way. But I do think it's a great little experience. It looks like on their website, it's $12.
Yeah.
And then the Flower Shop expansion is going to be a few dollars more than that. I like the replayability of it for the most part. I like the production. I like that it's a very simple kind of, automa seems strong, but like that little AI deck.
Yeah.
Really easy to manage. There's nothing to it. And I like the win-loss condition and the tiers of play. That all works for me. Bad things, randomness, and just that I wish I was playing it multiplayer.
Yeah.
Maybe the only other thing I would add is I do wish there was some way to keep score.
Yeah, over 3 rounds, I can't keep that in my head.
No.
I had to get a little pad of paper to write it down on.
Yeah, and it's not like you can store it on your calculator on your phone very easily. I had to just pull out my phone's little notepad and write it down, which is not the end of the world, but it's just not elegant either.
Right.
But that's a very minor thing. Overall, though, would this be a game that for you would be a stomp of approval game?
No, not for this game. It's a simple, cheap enough game that you could do it solo. It'd be great to have for like multiplayer, but I can't imagine this really captures that multiplayer experience.
Yeah, same for me. I do think it's really good. I don't want anybody hearing this to think that I'm down on Mike Mullen's solo design, because, man, I'm really not. I think he's done a great job adapting it. it just, for me, I think, I just really want to play this multiplayer. I don't think I would ever choose to get it out for solo when I've got other games of similar weight and size that I would go for first. So, but overall, a really good game. And if you could play it multiplayer, definitely check it out for that. So that is Tussie Mussie. And then we will jump just right into the second review, which is for Sprawlopolis. Sprawlopolis is a game that plays 1 to 4 players and comes to us from designers Stephen Aramini, Danny Devine, and Paul Kluka, and is also published by Button Shy Games. In Sprawlopolis, players are going to work together to build a new city from the ground up. So using, again, an 18-card deck, players are going to lay down cards to add new blocks to the city, build road systems, and try to meet goals that have been set for the city's growth. At the end of the game, if you have beaten your scoring goal by the time the deck runs out, you win the game. Simple as that. And for components for this game, honestly, a lot of this is going to be the same as Tussie Mussie.
Small deck of cards with colors on them.
Yeah, it's almost the exact same format. Now, I will say, I do think the artwork on this game is very functional and graphic design is clean and all that. It definitely is not the beautiful game that Tussie Mussie is.
Right. There's something pleasing about having the flower cards laid out and just the style and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And this looks like SimCity 2000 in a way.
Yeah, which is charming in its own way. And
right.
kind of nostalgia filled and all that. But it's not, I wouldn't call it beautiful. But the card quality with that really great finish on there that I think is the same kind of finish that Wingspan has. It's like almost linen. I don't know exactly what you would call it. It's really good card finish.
This seems linen. Is it not linen?
It's got, I don't know, it's linen-like. Anyway,
Sure.
They're really good
right.
cards.
Yeah, they're nice.
They're good cards, and the artwork on them and everything is really good. The rulebook for the game, again, extremely small. Only in this case, there's not a separate solo expansion needed, and so all the solo rules are the same. I mean, it has rules in there for cooperative play, but it's seriously the same rules. The only difference is you just pass your hand of cards to the next player if you're playing multiplayer. Everybody's sharing the same hand of cards.
Right. It's just you don't have to like burn your brain thinking about where to place a card for a little while until it gets to your turn again.
I don't like that. I would probably never play this multiplayer.
Yeah, I can't imagine it.
It's a solo game, folks. That's what it is. So the rules are simple, again, just as small a rule book as the other one. You can read it in just a couple of minutes. But no kidding, this is one of the heaviest little games I have ever encountered.
Yeah, it's a dense one.
Oh boy, it's a real brain burner of a game because essentially what you're doing is you're taking 3 cards out of this 18 card deck, and on the front of all the cards are 4 different colored squares basically that represent residential, commercial, industrial zones, and a park. And then there's also a bit of road on the card. And those are what you're going to lay out during the course of the game to form the city. On the other side, though, is a goal for the end of the game. It's going to say, for every park of 3 spaces or bigger, you're going to get so many points. Okay. So it gives you a way to generate points. And then in the upper left-hand corner of that same side of the card is a number. So you're going to pull out 3 of these cards randomly and then add the numbers in the top left together. That's the score you have to meet in order to win the game. And folks, when I read that in the rules and realized what they had done, that there are 18 of these cards in the deck and that all of them also function as map cards, I think my brain broke a little bit.
I love that kind of like efficient design.
Man, I said at the beginning of this that I don't hear about micro games and then seek them out, right? But that doesn't mean I haven't found games like that I really think are brilliant or that I enjoy. The first one I ever played, probably the first one that most people ever played, was Love Letter. I, to this day, still think that Love Letter is one of the most ingenious game designs I've ever encountered. It does so much with so little. But somehow this is more efficient than Love Letter. They're just utilizing the backs of the cards in that way. I don't do math because I do humanities stuff, but the number of combinations that you can make out of these 18 cards that you're pulling 3 from every time, that's insane. That's insane that every game of this is going to feel different.
Right, absolutely. Because all of it, the combination of like the goals you will have to try to hit these like specified point conditions to try to maximize the points, because you will be scraping for every single point you can get. And then just the draw of the card and just, it's going to be a radically different game every single time.
Man, I love it. I love you pull out those 3 cards. You've got your 3 different ways to score points. You've got your point goal for the game. I love that the point goal changes. I know this is a small thing, but some games are really low scoring games.
Right.
And some just feel impossibly high. I love how different that feels. And then basically what you're doing with the other 15 cards is you put one in the middle of the table, and then you have a hand of 3 that you have in front of you. You're looking at the maps. The roads are, one of them's cutting right through the middle of the card. Another is, maybe cutting through the bottom part of the card, and then there's a curve at the top. And you want to lay these cards down so that you're getting groups of different colored areas together, because at the end of the game, each of those segments, like the industrial and commercial, you're going to look at your largest zone and then add up all the spaces in it, and you'll get that many points for that zone. So you want those large spaces, but you also want to have as few roads as possible, because for every road that you have in the game, you're going to lose a point.
Right. So whenever you started saying there's roads on the cards and you said they cut through them, I thought you were just going to say the roads on the cards are jerks, because that's what they are.
They are 100% jerks. You don't have to connect roads, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can just put them any old way in your city, and nobody will be able to travel anywhere, and your infrastructure will suck. But if you do that, man, that's where you lose points in this game so fast, not paying attention to your roads. And I like that there are those 2 kind of built-in ways to get points in every game. But then the backs of those cards that are setting your point value are also telling you, hey, here are 3 other ways this game that you'll earn points. And the combination of those 5 things to think about for how to earn points, plus, how not to lose them with the roads, and then the fact that when you're laying down these cards, you can connect them basically any way that you want to. You can overlap cards if you want and cover up the commercial districts. Like one of the cards in here says, have as few industrial spaces as possible.
Oh, yeah. I had that card for one of my games.
Ooh, the board gets real packed. You're just stacking cards every way that you possibly can. And of course, you can't, with the layout of these cards, you can't get rid of all of them. It's not possible. But it doesn't stop you from trying.
Nope.
It seems odd to say, but each of these cards, the only thing that changes from card to card really is where the different colored squares are on the card and where the roads are. That's it. But because of the goals and because you can overlap cards, I cannot tell you how many times I stared at a hand of 3 cards for 10 minutes trying to puzzle out where the best place would be to put this card down.
Yeah, this game really locked me down on some of the turns, just trying to figure it out. And man, when you really start to get it to the end of the game and you have a lot of options to put things down and you're just like, no, okay, I could do, no, over here. It is a lot to take in. It is a dense, crunchy game.
I would say you are not prone to analysis paralysis kind of stuff when we're playing multiplayer games.
Right.
At least it doesn't feel that way to me. Mm-hmm. But it does seem like opportunities for AP are your kryptonite.
Yes. If I don't have the social expectation to be a decent human being, I'm just with myself in a room in silence trying to figure out the best thing possible. And yeah, it can cause problems.
Yeah, your brain overheat a little bit when you're playing this.
Yeah, man. I don't know how long the first game took. I was expecting to be like, oh, it's a fun game. You got little city blocks and you just put them in there. And then I think it was 45 minutes or something. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know.
This game says it's a 15-minute game.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is. I've played some 15-minute games, but you really are in control of how long this game is.
Right. And I don't like being in control of that.
Most of the time, at some point, I have to just choose to stop analyzing the board state, because there really are just so many variables in that few set of cards. You can stare at it for a really long time and kind of drive yourself crazy. And it's made worse by the fact that not only do you have these 3 cards in your hand and the cards on the board, but you also, the deck of map cards is face up. So you see what's coming next that's going to go into your hand.
Yeah, I just try to pretend that card didn't exist yet.
Woo-wee. It's a doozy, man. And I don't know what I was expecting. I'd heard really good things about this game for a long time. I was not expecting it to be that level of puzzly. So you should just know going in that if you don't like puzzly games, you're going to hate this. Mm-hmm. That's all this is. It is a spatial puzzle.
Yes.
But if you do like them, This one is good. It is good.
It's so well designed. It just, yeah, I mean, we talked about like the efficiency of it. Like there's so much variety in it. And then just, yeah, 3 choices is just like, it's like a little too much to contemplate in a good way as far as which card you're going to put down. But yeah, it is super puzzly if you really want to consider all of your options and trying to figure it out.
I've talked before about how much I appreciate rules to depth ratio in games. This is the number 1 best rules to depth ratio game I've ever experienced. Like, in my mind, nothing comes close. It's really astounding what they've done. And also, replayability for this game is insane. There are 4 mini expansions for this, and I've not played them. All of them sound really interesting. Like, they'll add beaches. When you come up on a beach, you can't play cards past that border because it's the beach. There's like construction zones and points of interest where you'll want to group houses and other kind of high traffic areas around them, and a single card expansion with a Godzilla type creature that just covers up one of your cards.
I mean, part of that is dumb to me, but I also love it.
Yeah, it is dumb because it makes a game that is super difficult, by the way, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it makes it just hard in a random dumb way.
Right.
But if you want a game with a lot of replayability, I would sometimes play with that. Yeah,
I mean, I could see that. I don't know. I mean, it just sounds like punishment.
Yeah, I'm going to do it though.
Okay.
I know myself. I know I'm going to do it. We can talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game because I think we've covered all of it at this point. The number 1 good thing for me is this is the most puzzly micro game I can even imagine. I just don't understand how they pulled off a game that makes me think this hard with this few cards. And like the other one, production quality is good, but replayability through the roof. They're cool expansions. This is another game that has kind of a variable win condition because of the way the points score or the points are set each game. Yeah, all that for me goes in the good column.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only bad thing that I can think of, and it's not as bad for me, but I bet it will be higher for you, is, well, I guess there are 2 bad things. The first one is just going to be your brain can lock up. You can find yourself staring at the same set of cards for way too long for a game of this size. And that can become a problem because at some point you just have to choose to stop thinking so hard.
Right.
The other thing is some of the combos of those goal cards that come out are easier than others. The difficulty of the game is going to kind of change pretty dramatically, I would say, from game to game. That's not a problem or anything, but you really can't compare how well you do in one game to another game, like to decide win rates don't matter in this, because sometimes you'll have 2 goals that really dovetail nicely, and in other games you'll have goals that are like these 2 things are almost competing against one another.
Right. Yeah. The only game I won was because there was 2 of the goals like dovetailed, like you said, really well together, and so it made it easier.
That doesn't bother me.
Right.
I do think it's a fair amount of randomness there that does significantly shape your experience with the game. And the games where you do have 2 that dovetail feel really good.
Right.
You feel efficient, and the other feels like a slog sometimes. But that's really it for me.
I think you're forgetting one bad for you, Brandon.
What's that?
There's no card backs on here for you to admire.
That's a good point. That's in the ugly category. Yeah, there's no card backs. The whole game is fronts.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, for me, we can talk about this a little bit. For me, this is a stomp game. I had heard that this was kind of a modern solo classic, and I wondered, like I always wonder, how I'm going to feel about it. I was still, even as much as I'd heard about it, it caught me off guard how brilliant I think this design is. And how much fun this puzzle is for me. My brain engages with it in a nice way. Spatial puzzles aren't usually my thing, but there's just something about how meaty this is for how small it is that this is a game that represents why I stand in awe of board games as a medium. What you're able to accomplish with 18 cards there's no analog in the video game world that I know of or other media forms. It's astounding. Cards have been around for ages, but somehow this feels fresh and new.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say, I think this is just phenomenally designed game, really good, but it hurts my brain too much for me to give it the stomp. And it's one of those just like personal things. I would highly recommend this game to anyone, especially if you like puzzle games, but For me, it was, I played it several times and I thought it was good, but I didn't feel good at the end of it just because of how, like, it's hard for me to disengage in that way. And so it was just a little too much, just AP in how it's designed. It causes me. So
if you're not familiar with the Stomp, we should say, probably should have said earlier in the episode, but whatever. The Stomp of Approval is an award that we give to games that we would recommend even if you only ever played them solo, and games that both of us personally love, right? So neither of these games is going to get the Stomp of Approval from us, even though I personally would give it one. And I think it's important to say that because if we were giving this award based on whether this is kind of objectively a great solo game, I think it would get it. There are plenty of games we played that would probably get it. But because we've set it up like that, the reason we did that is because our perspectives and how we approach solo games as a whole are so different that if a game gets it from both of us, it's like a Hall of Fame kind of solo experience that'll appeal to a really broad range of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This game, for as much as I love it, I completely understand why someone wouldn't, because it is a pretty intense puzzle. It's not going to be for everybody. But if you like puzzle games, definitely check it out.
Absolutely.
The bang for your buck's insane. So that's all that we've got for that review. And really, that's all we've got for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this kind of special double feature episode with covering these two small games. I really enjoyed finally getting to sit down with Button Shy games. This has left me wanting to try more of them.
Yeah, this is just a cool format to do card games in.
Yeah, it really is. I guess I just assumed it was going to be kind of a gimmick. Mm-hmm. But it's really not. These are great designs in a small package, so definitely check those Button Shy games out. And folks, that's all we've got for this episode. If you haven't heard, we are part of the Dice Tower Network, which is a network of shows about board games that cover them from all kinds of different angles. You should go on to dicetower.com if you like this show and check out other shows in the network. See if there are other shows out there that strike your fancy. Check those out when you get a chance. There's some really, really good ones on there. In particular, recently I've been listening to the Beyond Solitaire podcast, which, if you've not heard it yet, is so good. Liz Davidson, who covers solo games regularly, interviews a bunch of different folks like ancient historians and a guy who does, David Thompson, who designed Castle Itter. His day job is mapping battlefields.
Oh.
He has like a contract job with the military or something, mapping battlefields. And he talks about that impact on game design, and not only game design, but how we understand history of battles and tell the stories of the people in them. Is really, really good stuff and different from anything else I've heard. And that's just one of dozens of shows that are in the network. So go and check those out when you get a chance. Also, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram. I'm not going to promise you that's grade A content, because it's not. It's like when I think of doing a thing that's worth posting, I'll do it, which is sometimes once every week and a half. Mm-hmm. But it's a good way to keep up with what we're playing and get a chance to see what's coming down the pike from us. So go and follow us there. Our Instagram handle is @Solosauruspodcast. You can also email us at solosauruspodcast@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments for us. We're happy to talk with you. And then also we do have on Board Game Geek, we have our own micro badge. And every time I announce this, I've been doing it for a long time, we always have people who are interested in it. But Geek Gold on BGG is just, for some reason, very hard to come by, and they make that economy very tight. Each one of these costs 8 Geek Gold, and we're more than happy to spot you that so that you can get one for yourself. Just shoot me a message, and I'll send you that over real quick. So go ahead and do that, and yeah, that's all we've got for this episode, folks. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.